Okay, can I have all your attention, please? Good morning and a very warm welcome to all to the launch of our third edition of the annual survey of MSMEs. This is a topic that's of close. Can you hear me? Okay. This is a topic that's very close to our heart because identifying the right policies to foster the growth of MSMEs is now a national priority. The issue excites us also because it's a multi-sectoral in nature, placed at the intersection of enterprise development, digitalization, and trade and commerce, enabling us to bring together our different thematic practices to work on a common problem. Equally important, issues like this enable us to bring together many thoughtful people like our fellow panelists, Mr. Santosh Kumar Sarangi, Mr. Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Ms. Aruna Sharma, some of them will be joining us shortly, Mr. Atish Singh, Mr. Anil Varadwaj, Mr. Janak Raz, and two of my colleagues, Tanu Goyal and Puja, Mehra. Can you hear me? Okay. So it's a privilege to have with us Mr. Santosh Kumar Sarangi, Additional Secretary, Director General DGFT, Department of Commerce. It's customary for me to thank our keynote speaker for taking time out of his or her busy schedule to join us for the inaugural session. But in this case, I really mean it. You can imagine Mr. Sarangi's schedule given that we are only 3 days away from the reciprocal tariff day. So he's extremely busy with many preoccupations. We're really grateful for him to make time for us. We're also equally privileged to have Mr. Sanjeev Bikhchandani among us. He wears many hats, from the founder and executive vice chairman of the Info Age to a co-founder of the Ashoka University. But for us, the most important hat that Sanjeev wears is the board member of ICRIER. He has been behind the scene source of inspiration for many of the new ways we write our report and disseminate them. What you will see today started as a post-pandemic necessity, that is MSMEs going digital for surviving the mobility and travel restriction that was imposed. But it has now become a strategic choice for them to upgrade and grow. And thanks to some of our founders like Walmart, who have been our partner in this journey to track the development of MSMEs over the past 3 years. In 2021, when we started the survey, we surveyed about 1,500 manufacturing MSMEs and compared the firm's post-pandemic performance to the pre-pandemic levels, evaluating the role of digitalization in the survival of these firms. In the second edition, the survey was expanded to a longitudinal survey comprising about 2,000 cross-sectoral sectional firms, equally divided between firms which are using e-commerce and firms that were not using e-commerce. In this survey, we further expanded the survey sample to 2,365 MSMEs, and this gives us a unique advantage to build both time series and cross-sectional database on MSMEs and their e-commerce use. I believe there is no other entity in India which actually has a panel data on MSMEs and does it every year. So this is a really useful source of information to understand how MSMEs are performing. I let the team talk about the findings of the report, but let me leave two of my observations here. First, the story that comes out from the survey is not one of distress, stagnation, and fragility of MSMEs, but one of resilience, recovery, and renewal. So this is a much more optimistic story on MSMEs you'll find in this report than you see normally. Second, the policy space for MSMEs have become more subtle and sophisticated. The binding challenges to growth for MSMEs integrated to e-commerce are very different from barriers facing non-integrated MSMEs. So these observations imply that India's MSMEs have a more optimistic future, but they need support with appropriate and customized policy intervention and investment. So with these brief remarks, now let me welcome, initially we were supposed to invite Mr. Sarangi, but we know both our speakers have very tight timeline. Sanjeev has to go to Parliament by 12 and Mr. Sarangi has to leave at 10:45. So we're going to start with Mr. Sanjeev and then we'll invite the keynote speaker to Mr. Sarangi. So Sanjeev, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarangi, for allowing me to speak before you. I'm not going to Parliament. The meeting is in Parliament House, but I'm not going to Parliament. Okay. Okay. No, but the meeting was in the afternoon, but suddenly the minister preponed it, and so now you can't say no. So I have to go. I'm so sorry. So I was there at the launch of this report last year as well. And the truth is, MSMEs are the lifeblood of Indian industry. There are 73 million if you include unregistered, 33 million if you use registered data, Udyam registered. Now the point is they don't really have a voice, because everybody, all press, all media, focuses on either macro, aggregate data क्या है, और अगर individual company को report they are about large companies. So MSMEs don't really have a voice, but they are probably the largest employer. They are, and they contribute very large aggregate output in the GDP. And the truth is, you look at it world over, employment growth, investment growth, a lot of it happens in the small and medium enterprise sector, the startups. And therefore, it's really important that somebody, and ICRIER, focuses on MSMEs. Because that's, हम ease of doing business की बात करते हैं, but जो सारे ease of doing business के survey होते हैं, they focus on large companies. Nobody really asks 73 million MSMEs, how is it dealing with the government and inspectors at the bottom ground level. Nobody asks how easy or difficult it is for you to get credit to the MSMEs. Right? Credit का data हम aggregate में देखते हैं, या फिर हम बड़ी कंपनी से बात करते हैं. So this is a very important intervention now, an annual feature which ICRIER is doing, and some of the findings will be insightful, some of the findings will be expected, some will be unexpected. So while the expected findings are expected, it's the unexpected findings that I think will be a point of discussion. Right? कि क्या चीज़ है जो हमें नहीं पता थी, but ये शायद उभर के आ रही है among MSMEs. So I look forward to this year's report, and thank you so much for inviting me, and all the best. Thank you.
So, in the interest of time, Mr. Sarangi, would you like to say a few words about the report, the MSME landscape in general? And also, I must share here that we are going to be starting, in fact, we've started a study with the DGFT office on looking at the trade finance aspect for export-oriented MSMEs. So we are glad that this work is building up and the sector is getting its due importance, just as Mr. Sarangi said that so far the sector has been marginalized in terms of its coverage. And a very different picture of MSMEs emerging in media, in general perception. So I invite Mr. Sarangi to, thank you sir, first of all, despite your busy schedule for coming, I invite you to say a few words about the report and your engagement with ICRIER in general on the subject.
Thank you very much. Working? Thank you. On the thank you, Tanu, for inviting me to the session. Mr. Bikhchandani, Mr. Dr. Deepak, Mishra, and the esteemed guests. It's a great pleasure to join you today morning for the launch of this particular report. As Mr. Bikhchandani rightly pointed out, this provides certain insights which are not commonly available, and why this provides this insight was mentioned by Mr. Mishra when he mentioned that both time series as well as cross-sectional analysis of MSMEs on a yearly basis is probably not done by any other research body, and to that extent I think you have a repository of a wealth of data pertaining to MSMEs, and the inferences which you make out of your survey is quite insightful. I was looking at the executive summary of the current year's report, and that clearly suggests that contrary to the public perception, the MSMEs also have been getting the benefits of a trickle down when our economy has been growing at 6.5, 7.5% in the last couple of years. So that's very clearly coming out in this report, that the impact of trickle down, when the pie is getting larger, a share is getting distributed among a larger cross section, and that includes a larger cross section of MSMEs. But that notwithstanding, there are a lot of disadvantages which MSMEs face. Disadvantages include access to information, access to capital, and the cost of capital. So that has also been brought out very clearly in this particular report, and I'm sure these kind of inputs would go a long way into building policies for MSMEs, as well as removing some of the implementation barriers which are there in some of our policies. For example, we run in the MSME ministry, a lot of schemes are run for MSMEs, but are they really impactful? Are they addressing the real issues of MSMEs is something which we need to assess. For example, when we are claiming that we are giving collateral free or collateral support to MSMEs, are the bankers actually working on it and providing the extent of collateral support which is required, or are they asking for a much higher collateral to MSMEs? Similarly, the interest rate which they are charging. We have a wealth of data with regard to the spread of banks over and above the repo rate, and that I think we have shared with you. ICRIER is currently doing a study for us with regard to the export credit, and we were running a scheme called interest equalization scheme, where we saw that vis-a-vis non-MSMEs, the MSMEs are subjected to a much higher interest rate by the banks, and if you look at the spread of the banks which they charge for MSMEs, it tends to be 4.5 to 6.5% higher than the repo rate. This is in sharp contrast to the spread charged by the overseas banks. So when it comes to competition in the global market, our MSMEs have a clear disadvantage vis-a-vis their peers in the overseas countries. So the cost of the capital, access to capital are issues which confront MSMEs. And within MSMEs, the e-commerce exporters tend to be in the micro and small segment. And for them, the interest rate could be even higher than 4.5 to 6.5 plus repo rate for many of these e-commerce exporters. Sometimes it can be 15 to 16% for e-commerce exporters. So keeping that in view, the government has also been working on addressing these disadvantages of high interest rates, and also to provide Niryat credit card, that is export credit card to e-commerce exporters with a credit limit up to 15 to 20 lakhs for e-commerce exporters, so that they can rotate it in multiple tranches. So that's an area where we are looking for inputs from the ICRIER study, which will provide us inputs with regard to strengthening a scheme like interest equalization, a scheme like Niryat credit card, a scheme like collateral support to MSMEs for accessing export credit, both pre-shipment as well as post-shipment credit. So these are areas in which the current report is going to provide us with a lot of insight, and our current work which is going on with ICRIER, we are looking forward to more robust recommendation coming out of that report. Another positive thing that I noticed was those MSMEs who have adapted to technology faster, both in terms of digital technology as well as technology in manufacturing, tend to be much more competitive and tend to be much more progressive and profitable while they are working. So that's also an insightful thing where the role of technology and the role of digitization, the positive impact of it is clearly coming out in this report. So that's an area in which I think our MSME ministry, our commerce ministry will have to work in future to ensure that adoption of new technology as well as adaptability to the skills required to use those technologies are strengthened among MSMEs, and to that extent reorientation of some of our schemes would be required. So with this I'll end and again compliment Dr. Mishra, Tanu and her team for having come out with this report, and I wish all success to the team. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. So, yeah, because Mr. Bikhchandani has to leave also. So let's just. So these are the team members.
Well done. Well done. Please remove this.
The picture will not be
शादी में करते हैं ऊपर वाला वाला
Post 10:30, there'll be a domino effect of people leaving, and I want to make most of the time that I have right now to talk to you about some of the work that we've done. And first of all, thank you so much for saying such good things about the work that we've done in this space, and I must also thank the contributors, Havish and Ria, for working very hard over the last 1 year, and the entire ICRIER team which has made this event happen at such a short notice. We'll keep doing thanks through the day, but let me just talk to you a little bit about the survey and also some of the key findings, and I'm going to rush through. We are here, we can talk about them in depth through the time that you are here. So this survey has been mentioned several times. This is the first survey which is both intertemporal and cross-sectional. So we've tracked the progress of the enterprise over time, starting 21-22 to 23-24, and also across two groups, firms that are integrated on platforms, which we call the digitized firms that have embraced technology, and the non-integrated firms. So 2,300 plus MSMEs were covered across 12 state and 24 districts. A cluster-based approach was taken for selecting the enterprise using a purposive sampling technique. Also, we used a CAPI device to capture responses. All the surveys were done in person through a survey agency Ipsos. And the pilot happened in July 2024, and the field survey was launched in September, and it concluded in November. These are some of the snippets from the survey. We visited a few factory floors. There were garment factories, tea making unit, another garment factory. Then there's this one food processing unit which had an e-commerce dispatch floor. So it was quite interesting actually to go and meet with some of these enterprises. The driving questions for this survey were, first, how have the MSMEs performed post-COVID? Does digitization, particularly integration on e-commerce platforms, have any impact on businesses? And we this time actually went in detail to the second order effect, and second order is basically that goes beyond the business metrics. So whether integration actually helped firms to improve access to finance, access to markets, and even access to information. And finally, we also wanted to dwell deeper into what are the challenges faced by MSMEs and whether integrated and non-integrated firms face different set of challenges. The idea was to see how all of this lead to enterprise development. And when I say enterprise development, while it's a very vague sounding term, it actually simply means establishment and scaling up of enterprises and making them more sustainable over the years. The first major finding, and now I'm going to go on to the findings, and in the interest of time, I'll just talk about the broad findings, show some graphs, They are all there in the report. Copy of the report is there. Once it's released, you can pick up a copy of the report and we can talk more about the broad findings. But the first major finding that we had was that post-COVID, Indian MSMEs have actually demonstrated remarkable resilience. And if you see the turnover, profit margins and employment, you'll see that year on year there has been improvement. So when we look at the turnover data and when we count the number of firms which have actually reported an increase in turnover, we found that 50% of the enterprises have shown an increase in turnover over the last 2 years. The average increase over last 1 year has been about 11.4%. And the number of firms in higher turnover ranges, which is about 1 crore, has actually gone up in the last 2 years. When you look at profit margins, again, we see the firms that have reported over 20% profit margin have also increased over the past 2 years. And this graph shows how there has been a shift. So from 21, 22 to 22, 23, there's been a higher shift because they started off with a low base. But 22, 23, again, there has been a shift. There's been some shift, but the profit margins definitely show an increase, a movement more towards the left-hand side of the curve. And then when you look at employment ranges, you find again that the number of firms that are actually hiring more than 10 employees has gone up over the last few years. And this is for the entire landscape, integrated and non-integrated together. Now here I must add that in India, we follow a composite criteria which is based on turnover and investments to define a firm as MSME. Now, if you actually look at this figure and think of the international criteria, a lot of our firms internationally actually come in the small category and not micro because they are hiring more and more labor going forward. So ICRIER survey indicates that in the last 3 years, majority of the survey firms have seen sales growth, profit margins have improved and hiring has increased, showcasing enterprise growth. The second major finding of this survey is that digitization has been a key driver of accelerated growth. And here we have 3 graphs that actually show that to begin with, integrated firms are more productive firms. So they start at higher turnover ranges, but with integration, the turnover increases further. So I'll just flip through, but the broad point here is that 25% of the integrated firms were on higher turnover ranges of more than 1 crore in 2021, and the number increased to nearly 38% firms, and for non-integrated from 20 to 25% of the firms. In fact, the average turnover increase when we calculate it has been 13% for integrated firms and about 8% for non-integrated ones. Same is the story for profits and same is the story for employment, where the number of firms in the higher employment brackets in the integrated category have grown faster than the non-integrated ones. So firms that have integrated with platforms have outperformed the non-integrated ones, benefiting from faster expansion and more opportunities opening up. Beyond business growth, now this is a third major finding, that beyond business growth, digitization offers interesting second order benefits. And when we say second order benefits, we talk about innovative business practices and new investments that firm make after digitizing. So one is that most of the firms said that their sales and profits increased after integration. But at the same time, about 60% of the firms that we surveyed actually invested in skill upgradation, technical skill and technique upgradation and training of employees after integration. About 90% of the firms introduced innovative practices, including mix of new production methods, launching new products, and some of them actually also started exporting after integrating on platforms. A higher percentage of integrated firms also enrolled on other online channels for making sales. So, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. So a higher percentage of integrated firms actually also started selling through other online channels. So not just on platforms, but some of them launched their own websites. Some of them actually started selling through social commerce, thereby showing that these firms are embracing technology more openly, and they are also using technology for its revenue generating potential much more than the non-integrated firm. And in fact, if you see the numbers, about 65% of the integrated firms are doing so as compared to just 11% of the non-integrated firms. The next few slides actually show some really interesting findings in terms of access to finance and access to international markets. While access to finance, as has been mentioned, it remains a persistent challenge, but we found that it's not insurmountable. While the cost of credit is high and the credit gap is also high, and I'm going to talk to you about how this is happening, but we see that as the firm size increases, credit becomes less of an issue. It remains, but it doesn't become a very prominent, it doesn't remain a very prominent challenge. And at the same time, credit gap also reduces. And this also happens in the case of integrated firms. So when we did an average, so we asked a simple question. We asked the firms that what is the average rate of interest that you are paying on your current loan? So about out of the 2,300 firms, 1,100 had an ongoing loan. The average rate of interest that they were paying when you average it out, and people may say that it's not okay to average it out simply, but interest rate is a function of certain structural issues which happen to MSMEs because of their size. So if you just take a simple average, it's about 12.58%, 12.27% on an average. That's the rate of interest that MSMEs are paying on the loan that they've taken. More often than not, this is small ticket, small duration loan, which is just to meet the working capital requirement. But when you compare slightly larger firms, so when you compare medium-sized firms and micro firms, you see that the interest rate for medium firms is almost 1% lower. When you see integrated versus non-integrated, you see that integrated firms are paying relatively lower rate of interest compared to non-integrated one. Also, when you look at the credit gap, basically we asked a simple question that the loan that you've taken, how much of your current credit requirement does it meet? And we found that for a majority of the firms, it doesn't meet 100% of their loan requirement. However, the credit gap again is lower for slightly larger sized firms. So when you look at small and medium enterprises, when you look at the larger sized firm, the credit gap is also lower. And for integrated firms, again, the credit gap is lower. MSMEs struggle to secure collateral-free loan, and in fact, this is more anecdotal because this came out during the pilot surveys. In the average, it becomes much lower. But what came out in the pilot surveys was that oftentimes, in the absence of collateral, the rate of interest on loans is as high as 20 to 24%. It goes somewhere between, which is very high. And often, again, this is firms, especially that are export-oriented, they often need multiple loans because if there's a big order, to meet that working capital requirement, to have the inventory, they have to take multiple loans, and as they take multiple loans, the rate of interest goes up further. So we found that in their entire existence, only 23% of the enterprises had taken loan, more than 50% being integrated firms. And about 30% felt that with their integration, the ability to raise collateral-free loan has improved. Last year in our survey, and a lot of our findings are year on year and we keep building on them. Last year in our survey, we found that some interesting non-banking financial corporations and innovative models have come which actually use the earnings made on platform to underwrite these loans. And then the information collateral replaces the need for physical collateral. Also through certain some data-driven DPIs, the need for information collateral is actually in some places replacing the need for physical collateral. So these new models have to be leveraged to make sure that some of the structural issues that MSMEs are facing are overcome. Finally, e-commerce serves as a gateway to global trade, particularly for really small size enterprises, micro enterprises. Sorry, this is a bit busy slide, but some of the core messages here are that in general, if you look at the entire MSME landscape, about 16 to 17% of firms are actually integrated in global trade. This is something which has come out in our survey also, and this is a number which most of the survey statistics show that it's about 16 to 17% of the firms that are actually exporting. A majority within this, there's a disparity. A greater number of medium-sized firms, obviously because these are more productive firms, are integrated in export with international trade market. E-commerce platforms are actually preferred medium for exporting for firms which are integrated and are export-oriented. So about 93% of the integrated export-oriented firms are directly exporting through platforms. Now, one has to be mindful that a lot of these exports are B2C. These are not B2B exports. So the size of the export may be small. But the fact that this e-commerce platform is providing firms the gateway to access international market is something which is very reassuring. Also, it was pointed out that the export potential is not fully tapped at this moment. Only nearly 21% of the firms that are not currently exporting wanted to export. When we asked integrated firms, about 83% wanted to export in the next 2 to 3 years, while 75% of the non-integrated firms wanted to export. Information gaps, information about product standards, information about markets, information about potential buyers are some of the key challenges that are inhibiting firms' ability to integrate in global market. And it was felt that e-commerce linkages can actually help in addressing some of these challenges by creating direct linkages between firms and buyers. Finally, looking ahead, we found that fostering a digital transformation of MSME can help tap full potential of these enterprises. I'd start with some of the challenges actually, So we had given a list of challenges to firms. So integrated firms were given a longer list of challenges, which included challenges that come with platforms. And non-integrated firms were given a shorter list of challenges, which only included certain structural challenges that MSMEs face, and these were randomized. And we found that the characteristics of these challenges are very different for integrated and non-integrated firms. While non-integrated firms chose to pick up challenges which are largely structural in nature, so access to finance, access to markets, etc. Non-integrated firms picked up challenges like refunds and return policies of platforms, ability to attract skilled workforce to run these platforms, and marketing staff that can run these platforms. So, on the one hand, there's a need to support digital transformation of the non-integrated firms because, to begin with, these are less productive firms, and with digitization, if these don't embrace technologies, the gap between the digitized and the non-digitized firms, the inequalities exacerbate. But at the same time, we have to make sure that the firms that are integrated are able to utilize the full potential of these platforms. The second order benefits are leveraged as much as possible. And for that, there's a need to create an ecosystem, which is both physical ecosystem as well as a digital ecosystem, where you have the right infrastructure put in place to ensure that firms are able to leverage technology to take full advantage of it. So enhancing technology access, upgrading skills, and developing a robust system will help us maximize the benefits of these platforms. Thank you so much. There are more findings in the report. Thanks. Yes, please.
Okay. So Mrs. Sarangi is going to take a few questions, or at least one question. So let's start with, so at least I see two gentlemen over here, first on the right and then left. Please. Can somebody get a mic to him, please? I'll appreciate if you introduce yourself, just your name and affiliation, and keep your question very brief. Thank you.
My name is Dinesh Abrol. I'm professor at ISID earlier, formerly in NISTAT CSIR. As chief scientist, I retired, and now I am at JNU TRCSS Sustainability Studies. Okay, that's my brief introduction. I've been also involved with the pharmaceutical industry, and MSMEs from pharma are targeted for reasons related to manufacturing excellence. Quality is involved in that, and as it's very important. So I was looking at the challenge of second order benefits from digitalization in manufacturing excellence on the one hand. On the other hand, extending it further to quality, which is a social benefit and a benefit to the consumer of good quality medicines, be in exports or in domestic market. I wanted to know whether we've been able to focus on these issues, that how digitalization is impacting on manufacturing excellence. Number one, environmental benefits, for example, because digitalization is supposed to achieve certain other ends itself. So I suppose if it has not been done, we do it. That's all. I would say that. This is my brief question and a focus area.
Thank you. It would be good if you ask the question specifically for Mr. Sarangi, because he has to leave, and then Tanu can take on more questions. So whoever, so you spoke, but it has to be about the question of Mr. Sarangi and not about the general.
Can you give me some clue about our future vision, the way we are AI robotics is going to help our MSMEs?
Can I know there are a couple of people on the back, but we'll make sure that you'll get the opportunity to ask question. But can I ask, Puja had raised her hand. Can I give the mic to her, please? Thank you.
Mr. Sarangi, I wanted to ask you that given the reciprocal tariffs are going to come from April 2, and I believe the government is offered to reduce tariffs on a range of product lines, what do you think is going to be the impact on the MSME sector of that?
So I'll take all three together. In terms of the impact of technology on MSMEs and the extent to which they should adapt new technologies is something on which I don't think there is any second opinion. This is a requirement, this is a need. And if they want to produce quality product and remain competitive in the market, the sooner they adapt to these new technologies, the better. Will it have some impact on the employment scenario? The opinion is divided. There is one section which says that with adoption of technologies like AI, machine learning, it is possible that we will have a more skilled workforce handling technology and improving productivity as well as the quality of products. There is another group which says that it will severely impact jobs. I belong to the first segment, which believes that this will create more skilled workforce in the society and will help us in improving productivity as well as the quality of products. Coming to the reciprocal tariff issue, these are early days. The circulation which is going around the press that India has already offered and has offered massive reduction in duties is all guesswork which is going on by the media. Don't go by this. As we are speaking, there are teams from both sides sitting and discussing what should be the contours of a bilateral agreement. Both leaders have agreed to conclude it by the end of fall, which is around September, October. So an agreement which has been agreed to be concluded by September, the offers for tariff reduction is not going to be offered at this point of time. So the contours of this agreement are being worked out. And to that extent, since we have already initiated dialogue, it has been the effort of Government of India that since Government of India is discussing with US authorities on this, US counterparts, the tariff should not be imposed and deferred. You have heard President Trump saying that for some countries, he will be considering deferment. But going by what has happened in the last couple of days, nobody knows what is going to happen on April 2nd. So I can't really say whether he is going to defer it, whether he is going to impose and then negotiate. So this is anybody's guess. But as far as US is concerned, most of you know that we have huge complementarity with US. There are areas in which we can provide them market access, we can provide them with tariff reductions without really compromising our industry or our farm sector. So there are a couple of areas where our farm sector is slightly apprehensive. They are huge producers of soya, corn, and a few other agriculture products in which India also has a substantial production. Those possibly could be areas, but barring that, there are many other sectors where we are complementary economies. So from that perspective, working out a bilateral trade agreement with US should be an easier option vis-a-vis some of the other countries that we are negotiating with. So I'll end with this. Thank you. I'll leave. I'm sorry, I can't really take any question because Cabinet Secretary has kept a meeting at 11. I'll have to reach there by 11. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarangi, for coming. Thank you so much. Okay. So we'll continue the discussion till 11. I think there's one question that was not answered, which was about the impact of digitalization on manufacturing. So that's from here. And then let's collect two more questions from the backside. Yes, that over here. And I think there's one more person who was also asking a question. The man in the white shirt. Yes. Please. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Dr. M.R. Anand, and I worked as principal advisor in the Government of India. I worked for METI as well as DOT at one point in time, so I must congratulate you for bringing out this report, which should be very useful. I have a very straightforward question, which I think could have been answered in the report, but since I've not read it so far, how do you define digitization? The reason why I ask is it with reference to integration with platforms, or is it at all stages of production or process? But the two have very different implications. If you're only looking at the front end, it's a bit like, the environmental, if you remember leather goods, everybody was worried about what its coating was, because that's what consumer is concerned with. But what happens during the process is a different thing. So similarly, when it comes, that is when at the stage of procurement, at the stage of production. So that is one. Second is, have you also looked at procurement through the GEM portal, which is now 10 years old? Of course, exports is important, but firms which are in e-commerce, how much do they sell to the government or through the GEM portal? Thank you. GEM. There's much that has been talked about. Thank you.
Got that, yeah. The last question for this session. Okay, we'll go there. Okay. No, first here. I think, and then we'll come to you.
Actually, we have 11 till 11:15 for 11:10 and 11:15 for Q&A.
So my name is Dhairya Maheshwari. My question on reciprocal tariffs, it has been answered, but I would like to ask, add on another question to that. Have you studied in your report the impact, potential impact of reciprocal tariffs on the MSME sector, since the US, it's a major market for our MSME registered MSMEs? Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, over here.
I'm Dinesh Sharma. I'm a freelance journalist. I work with the Times of India and Pioneer. My question was basically for Mr. Sarangi, but since he has gone. This Inspector Raj remains a very serious problem. As a journalist, I come across people, especially micro and small, these inspectors, they go and they will ask so many questions and they will quote so many laws, they are not able to satisfy. And the problem is again that leads to corruption. So what is government doing about the Inspector Raja? I wish Mr. Sarangi would have.
Okay, so I'll let Tanu answer some of the questions that she can, but we'll have a panel session where we'll have Mr. Atish Singh from MSME Ministry, because he could be able to answer some of the questions that we can't answer.
Mr. Mishra, can I add one thing? I have not read the report, but I don't know how much attention has been paid to this problem of Inspector Raj in your report.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the problem that you're mentioning, sir, is very pertinent, but it's not something which we've covered in the scope of this particular study. But given that we are so interested in the subject, particularly on micro, small and medium enterprises, we'd like to cover these in our subsequent work. So thank you for that suggestion. Let me just start. I'm not going to take questions in any order, but I'm going to talk more about how this study is, and that would actually answer some of the questions which have come from all of you. One is the scope of this study. So here, when we talk about digitization, we are only looking at the revenue generating potential, which is integration on platform or not integrated firms. And we also go beyond just the e-commerce integration to check how many firms are actually selling online. So then that would include any online channel which is on social commerce, on their own websites, etc. So that's the limited way in which we are looking at digitization in this particular study, which is just the revenue generating potential. And this is something we also say in the beginning, that when we define that what are we going to cover in it, we are only going to look at how firms that are on platforms operating or performing vis-a-vis those which are not on platform, and going beyond how many of them are actually selling online in general, which goes beyond platforms. Pharmaceutical sector, unfortunately, is not a part of this study, because we've picked up 6 or 7 sectors at the intersection of the MSME segment, as well as those that can be sold online. And for a very long time, pharmaceutical sector, while it's now medicines, etc., are available for sale online, but at the time when the study started, it was not so prominently sold through these channels. But one of the offshoot is, which you asked, that whether firms are actually taking innovative practices, are they improving their manufacturing facilities, or are they investing in things like scaling, bringing new machinery, etc. We did have a question, and we did see that firms that are integrated on platforms, they are actually doing so. They are starting new, they're launching new products, they are undertaking product innovation. Some of them are also going on exporting. A lot of them are also investing in skill and technology upgradation. So that limited question is there in the survey, and we did find positive impact.
Impact of digitalization on manufacturing.
Yeah, so I think innovative business practices, we don't really have a question on number of machinery bought, or whether you've actually, but there is a question that says if you've invested in skill upgradation, if you've upgraded your production facility, but we don't dwell deeper into that question. But there is a question on whether you've invested in plant and machinery, which is there in the report.
What would reciprocal tariff?
Reciprocal tariff. So we are going to be starting. Saurabh, you asked this. Your name is Sauramesh. So you asked this question. So we are going to be starting a study with the DGFT office, which will look at the trade finance and export-oriented MSMEs in general. And probably this is also going to be a survey-based study where we'll interview 700 MSMEs. We can possibly ask a question in that survey, and maybe in the next study that we launch, you'll get your answer, hopefully before September.
Okay, let me add 2 things. First is for the gentleman from Meiti who had this very important question as to, are you looking beyond just the e-commerce part? So the answer is clearly no for this report, but we do produce another report in ICRIER called State of India's Digital Economy. So 24 report actually has a lot of data on farm level survey, how many MSMEs are using this for different activities. We also are indirectly involved in a report that Department of Telecommunication is producing about use of emerging technologies like IoT and AI by MSMEs. That report will be soon out. What we know is that the survey result shows that actually the adoption rate is very low among MSMEs, which I think we all know. But this survey actually goes into very detail to find out exactly. So is it in HR management? Is it in procurement? Is it in, all storage and all sorts of activities? So there's a very detailed report coming out, which will be very helpful for people who want to both, understand this, also want to sell technologies to MSMEs for this. On the manufacturing also, I agree, this report is not getting into that. That's a very important part, additive manufacturing, 3D manufacturing and all that stuff, which are also going to happen using digitalization. This report is much more limited to that. Finally, I want to say that the questions about the license RAS on MSMEs, we will have a session where we'll have 2 people who should be able to answer this. One is Mr. Atish Singh from MSME Ministry, so he could say a little bit. I think also we have the Federation of MSMEs President, Mr. Anil, Secretary General Mr. Anil Bharadwaj, who should be the right person to tell us how the licensing, process and the investigation and all that stuff that happens with MSMEs, how that has changed over time. But I have 3 more minutes to go. So if you have any 1 or 2 burning questions, I could take that.
Any negative impact that you have found in this report as part of because of digitization?
Good question. No,
yeah,
that's a good question. Let's collect some more. Yeah, over here, Rajkumar. Please.
I wanted to ask whether you have studied the relationship between large firms and MSMEs. The issue of payments has been a long-standing issue on the part of the MSMEs. Has the digitalization enabled, let us say, some improvement in that aspect? Does digitalization actually help in ensuring that the MSMEs get their payments in time and they are able to survive and do better? That's even more important than the Inspector Raj.
Okay, actually, that also reminds me the question that one of the gentlemen asked about GEM and whether
Yeah.
the GEM facilities are being met utilized. But can I also request the person who just asked about the negative findings on the report just to introduce yourself, please?
I'm actually a polymath scout. So, as one of my roles that I'm currently is I'm an entrepreneur running my own company, Anurakti Solutions, an IT company. So that's one part of
Thank
it.
you. Okay, last question, then we'll wrap this up.
I'm Vinish Sharma. My basic question is that we are finding that yes, I'm Vinish Sharma. My basic question is that we are finding that the MSMEs are finding a lot of issues as far as the logistics concerned. They are not able to get the warehouses, infrastructure, expressways, transportation. Overheads, etc. Port congestion, etc. So how can we streamline that so that the logistics cost, which is very high, sometimes at 20%, can come down and they can be efficient as compared to their peers in over other regions.
Okay. I think we found actually quite a few challenges when we looked at just the integrated firms, but they were significantly different. So, like I mentioned, that we had a list of challenges that we had presented to both integrated and non-integrated firms, and the integrated ones were given more challenges, which included that comes with integration. And incidentally, the firms that are integrated on platform actually gave precedence. So that some of their top challenges included challenges related to the platform. So one of the biggest challenge that comes about is the challenge of return and refund policies. And this came about also during our pilot surveys, that often firms find it difficult, so on whom does the burden lie? So when a consumer is returning a package, you open and you say, okay, you send a picture, this is not what I had ordered, and you return it. Oftentimes the payments get stuck. The other thing is, dealing with cybersecurity. Third is finding the right people to actually run these platforms, because these kind of skills, etc., are not very easy to find, at least at the micro enterprise level. So these were some of the challenges that came about. So platform charges are generally, for some reason, that didn't come out as one of the most prominent challenge, but one of the biggest challenges is return and refund policies, which are often skewed in the favor of consumers. So the moment a consumer raises a request saying that, okay, this is not fine, I want to return it, the money is given back immediately to the consumer. But ultimately, it is the seller that has to bear the brunt. So that was one of the big challenges which came up during the survey.
Can I ask you something on gender hiring?
Another interesting point that came out, it was there in the slides, I didn't focus on it as much, but on the gender hiring, we found that while both generally the representation of women in the MSME landscape is very low. It's poor. It's minuscule. If you see our sample, if you look at the entire unincorporated sector enterprise landscape, the ASUS survey says about 15 to 16% of the enterprises are owned by women, of which in our survey we found about 6 to 7% of the enterprises were owned by women. So which is a very poor state of affairs. Also, when you look at hiring, a lot of MSMEs are not hiring women workforce, even if these enterprises are owned by women. But what we saw, which was a silver lining or a ray of hope, was that when we visited these production floors, we found that when firms get large orders, and a lot of these production workers are piece rate workers, they get paid per piece. So when large order comes in ready-made garment factory, food processing factory, enterprises actually prefer to bring more women on the production floor because they find them more efficient. So colloquially they say, ये बीड़ी नहीं पीते, ये break कम लेते हैं, 8 घंटे में काफी सारे पीस बन जाते हैं. So monthly we have to, our monthly cost comes down, or they're more productive as workers. So that was the silver lining, that when they get more orders, especially export orders, then women hiring tend to go up. But these are all contractual workers on piece rates. But in general, even the women representation in the MSME landscape at this moment is very low. So that was another negative that we found during the survey about the overall landscape. There's another question.
Payment and
So
GEM.
yeah, so GEM portal, there is, you know, that there is a limit of 25% of procurement has to be done from MSMEs. Our study didn't cover GEM per se because GEM is B2B largely. It's government procurement. It's B2B. We focused on B2C, so it really didn't cover GEM. But I think Atish ji is here and Anil ji are here. They can say more about the GEM procurement. On payment side, now there are new rules which have come about that you have to pay an MSME within 45 days. You have to make the payments. You can't hold them up. Payment related issue we really didn't find. But what we found, which was more interesting, was the fact that if they are selling digitally, then the payments are also digital. So the receipt happens either immediately or at 1 week lag or something like that. So that was more positive. And we also have to be mindful that a lot of these integration, the platform based sales are B2C. A majority are B2C because we were only looking at the platforms which are like marketplaces, not India Mart, which are B2B platforms.
Good. So
There's, yeah. Okay. We can.
binding question. Okay. Can you please give it? This is the last question that you have.
I'm KK Roy Chaudhary, Energy and Environment Consultant. Does your report throw some light on preparedness and awareness for actions in the MSME sector? Because corporates depend on them to combat CBAM.
Preparedness for CBAM. How MSMEs are prepared.
It doesn't, but I can give you a general answer. I mean, again, I think Anil, you have a very big task of also answering some of questions which are directed to me because they're beyond the scope. But in general, this is a challenge, especially in the hard to abate sectors. When you look at steel and aluminium, which are the first ones to be under the whole CBAM purview. I think a lot of our MSMEs operate at least in the aluminium and steel segment, making all these small parts, etc. And there is, but I believe that bilateral negotiations are on in terms of how we can have carve out for MSMEs, particularly on the implementation of CBAM whenever that happens. So that's more of a negotiation issue. I mean, CBAM is going to become a reality because this is something which is a policy which is very internal to EU, and they are doing it, so to say, in a non-discriminatory manner. So the policy I don't think can be challenged per se, but maybe we can get some carve outs through bilateral negotiations when we have them with EU, and the BTIA negotiations are anyway on the comprehensive agreement. So maybe some of these issues can be taken up there. But this was not a part of the scope of this study.
Okay, very good. So thank you very much. So with this, we'll close the first session. I think there's a small coffee break.
Yeah.
And then we'll meet for the panel. A lot of the questions that you asked are actually meant for the panel. So please stay back and we'll have a terrific discussion. But then just let me request you to put up your hand for applause to Tanu and the team for a wonderful report.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So tea and coffee is served in the hall which is next door, and then we come back here. The panel discussion starts at 11:30. Will be moderated by Puja, Mehra. So we'll begin with the panel discussion where we'll hear from experts on the broader question of how digitization is actually helping MSMEs address some of the structural issues that they've been facing and some of the issues that we discussed and we couldn't be answered in the inaugural session. The panel is being moderated by Puja Mehra. Puja is a senior fellow consultant at ICRIER, and she is the consulting editor at Mint. Puja is a senior journalist. She's the author of The Lost Decade, 2008-18, How the India's Growth Story Devolved into Growth Without a Story. This book was shortlisted by The Economist magazine as one of the 6 books to read for understanding Indian economy. Puja has worked with The Hindu, The Times of India, and Business Standards. She hosts a podcast, How India's Economy Works. I believe it has a huge followership. And so over to you, Puja. She will be moderating the panel discussion. And on the panel, we have Dr. Aruna Sharma, Mr. Atish Singh, Mr. Anil Bhardwaj, Dr. Ram Singh, and Mr. Janak Raj.
So I'll introduce the panel. Dr. Aruna Sharma is independent member of microfinance institutions, and she was microfinance institutions member of the RBI's Digitalisation Committee in 2019. Mr. Atish Singh is Joint Secretary in the Ministry of MSME. Mr. Anil Bhardwaj is Secretary General of FISME, the Federation for Small Businesses. Mr. Janak Raj is a Senior Fellow at CSEP. Professor Ram Singh is Director of Delhi School of Economics. From today's discussion and the reports that I've been reading, various versions of it, there are many things that jumped out at me. I thought I will start by just, some of these are in the nature of questions. There are some questions that come to mind and some are observations. I thought I would start by just listing them so that our panelists could, depending on what interests them, perhaps dwell on some of those points and help us understand some of those issues. To begin with, it has always been said that the level playing field in India is not level. The playing field in India is not level between small businesses and large businesses. So, to what extent does digitalization, if at all, help reduce some of that disadvantage? The compliance burden of digitalization itself may be something to keep in mind over there. There are inherent biases and incentives in our overall system operating environment of businesses that keeps businesses small. So to give you an example, the power tariffs in many states, I recently learned, are such that the tariff plans for smaller firms charges electricity at lower rates than for larger firms. So that itself at times becomes an incentive for companies to remain, for firms to remain small. Then there is the whole point of why firms are not able to take advantage of the many schemes that government offers for MSMEs. It's not that there aren't many schemes, and this point came up in the morning also. But as we find that from all the MSMEs that there are in this country, the number registered in the government's portal is a small number, and they are not able to, those that are not registered especially, are not able to take advantage of the various schemes that are designed to help them. So why is that so, and if anything can be done to address that? I've thought it was very interesting for the survey to show that digital footprint is standing in for collateral, which is helping reduce the credit costs and the credit gap for firms. So if that is something to be that we need to discuss. So with these initial points, should we start the discussion? I'd like to invite Dr. Aruna Sharma to speak first, please.
Thank you so much. You have framed the issues so beautifully. Yes, if you look at the MSME point of view, which should be always a center stage, because that is where our problem of employment will ever get resolved. It's not the big companies which are going to give employment or trigger employment, even if they double or triple up their capacities. So the story lies in MSME. So the question comes is how quickly we are able to respond to resolve their tiny issues so that they are able to flourish and move ahead. So there are some intrinsic problems where we are incentivizing being small, like she rightly said, on the power tariffs or taxation or expansion. There are some method issues also which is creating a problem. Like GST is complicated, we all accept that it requires a lot of compliances. Less than 40 lakhs of turnover, you don't need a GST. But the moment you board on the e-commerce platform, because e-commerce, everybody is to have a GST. So even if they are exempted of a turnover of less than 40 lakhs, yet they will have to go ahead and register themselves. And then of course subjected to all the compliances that are required with it. The other issue which is very strong is available of working capital. You know, today many of the MSMEs can revive themselves if they have a working capital. So while complementing this study, which has come out very beautiful, because one reads with it, it is flagging it so well. But my suggestion to you is that next year you increase your sample size. So you have nearly 6 lakh people registered, 6 lakhs are there, and half of them are registered in the portals. So in that registered portals, you can take a variety which has been closed recently. You can take a variety who has boarded e-commerce platform recently. You can take a variety and get from them what kind of a market expansion has taken place, which you have done now. Very nicely you have captured them. So, and what are their problems? So at different stages they have a problem, and when you talk of credit what they are getting credit is maximum through NBFCs, not so much through the banks. So it is at a higher interest rates, but through NBFC, and that is the only source where less paperwork, less quarrels, less getting into the mess of because many of the MSMEs are defaulted, so then access to the bank is becoming a big question mark for them. So they are not eligible, and that is where working capital is creating a problem. So if you look at it, the closed MSME should also be your focus area of research as to what were the reasons which led to the closure. Some could be a sudden policy somersault which has affected them, but others could be non-access to working capital, like very rightly has been mentioned, or it could be this complication of going for e-commerce. Now, having said that, many of the MSMEs who boarded the e-commerce, the study has also brought out very well that their command area of the market increased considerably, and they were able to access the market, and the best part of it is they were able to get a real-time feedback as to what among their product, what variety is most welcome, what variety is not getting sold, what is the feedback coming from the consumer. So they could get that immediate feedback, and many of the smart MSMEs were able to do the course corrections immediately and then go back to the market. So they were able to sort of piggy ride on the feedback mechanism of e-commerce platforms. And that is what the MSMEs have to be taught, that to be very alert as to what product is getting demand, what product is not getting sold. If sold, what is the consumer feedback which is coming? Where is the problem that you are getting stuck? All that is going to make a difference. So that in a study, if in the following years we are able to get that highlight, it will be an excellent insight into how they are moving and how they are taking advantage of it. Another thing which has come out very well in this study also, which I found, is that these MSMEs with their expansion of the market have literally equally modified their domestic market as well as the export market. So all those who had desires to put their footstep in the export market, they could do it very well. If I can give you an example of the textile companies in India, who were, of course, the medium, they were not the micro or small. They captured the European market and the US market like anything during the COVID times. They were able to go, they got a real market feedback that what in linen is liked in India to be colorful, flowery, and everything is not so in those markets. They want muted shades, plain bed sheets and pillow covers and everything. So they modified their product completely, and they were able to go ahead and do that. So that has been an excellent feedback use case study. So if you can capture such case studies where they got these feedbacks and corrected their product lines and expanded the market, that will be a good learning place for others to see. Now the challenge that is coming is really worrisome, because the gig workers issues, because MSMEs, wherever they are in the service sector or delivery sector, or they are banking on the cloud kitchens or cloud mechanisms to vis-a-vis a solid manufacturing unit, which is working into spare parts and everything. Their complicated GST needs to be resolved. Their complicated, if they are into software, the gig workers issues has to be resolved, because there are multifarious kind of the employees. You can have more than one employees, and that is going to make a difference when they registered themselves as a small worker or as a consultant workers. These companies are working and giving the products very well in the service sector. So all this will have to be taken care of. So manufacturing, yes, where the goods are manufactured and where the services are also coming. So both have their own kind of issues. So that needs to be sorted out when they are small. And then the third party is definitely the interest rates and one-time working capital, so that they can trigger off. So you can do the policy analysis also if a sector has completely stopped. I can give you an example in Karnataka where secondary steel completely stopped the moment the government in 2015 went for the auction of the iron ore mines. So it became very difficult for them to get the iron ore, and they could not function well, and it resulted into stoppage. Right? They were not getting it at the right price because it was not available in market. And this is what is called. So such policies also, if you are able to flag, that will go a very long way. So in the end, I will compliment the efforts which has gone in this report. They have brought down the issues very, very beautifully and put it on the table. But you must analyze the issues which are a pain points and which are being fought at different forums, but many of them doesn't seem to be going to the logical end. So maybe, with that, if you can add on in the end or that kind of a chapter, that will be very, very helpful, and that can be pursued by the various forums when we go ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I'd like to invite Mr. Bhardwaj to take us through, some of the problems we understand digitalization is solving for MSMEs, the structural issues, the inherent biases, the lack of a level playing field. But is digitalization the solution to all the problems? To what extent it is working, and what more needs to be done? If we could, get a sense from you of that.
Thank you, ICRIER, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to share what I think about this issue. First of all, I must compliment ICRIER for bringing out this survey. I think third in series, and it is creating a time series so that people can see and judge how over a period of time MSMEs are faring in this issue. And I must also compliment because of it seems that survey results stand on firm footing because they are corroborating what we also experience at the ground. Like integrated firms are better, they fare better on most of the parameters, whether of growth or of employment, and e-commerce adoption and positive impact on sales. And thirdly, positive correlation of size, especially in the MSME space. So larger the firm, greater are the chances that it will be doubling into exports. Now, coming to the specific issue of the disadvantages and the biases, this is a fact that, MSMEs have a very difficult task at their hand. It's a very difficult vocation to be in, as a matter of fact, in India. We are an economy that is still in the phase of transition in many areas. And especially when it comes to the factor markets, whether it is banks, that is finance, and whether it is access to raw material, MSMEs face a huge amount of difficulties. Let's face it that almost 70% of the banking sector remains in the government hand. The level of competition in comparison to the competing nations, whether it is Malaysia, whether it is Thailand, whether it is Indonesia, Vietnam, kind of countries that we are really trying to compete with in order to gain from the China plus, you can say, an opportunity that might be emerging. We are not faring better. We are lagging behind by decades still in access to competitively priced finance. This is one. As Professor Bibek Devrai, who used to head the Prime Minister's Advisory Council, has very famously said that our banking sector, India's banking sector, is world's biggest monopoly, because ultimately government is the owner of 75% of the banking sector. And it has its own disadvantages in terms of access to better services and better priced finance. Similar is the case of raw material also. You'll be surprised that whether it is iron, steel, whether it is copper or aluminium or polymers, plastic raw material, the kind of products which are building blocks for manufacturing sector anywhere in the world are hugely protected in the country, and protected not only just by high tariffs. It is not you can say by chance that Trump is raising India as one of the poster boy of high tariffs. This is a fact of life, that iron, steel, copper, aluminium, polymers, etc., they attract the highest amount of duties. And apart from that, and these are raw materials, and I'm not mentioning about automobile. Automobile, for example, may be attracting over 100% duty. Similar is the case with alcohol. over 100 to 200% duty, and so on. So sticking to raw material, which is, I think, essential for MSMEs to produce competitively priced product. We face high tariffed raw material in India. And not only that, then we have anti-dumping duties. Then we have safeguard duties or countervailing duties. And not only that, later, in the last 2 years, we have seen emergence of quality control orders, QCOs. The cumulative impact of all this put together is that raw materials in India, in all these 4 or 5 major categories, is 30 to 40% higher than the international market. Now that makes MSMEs uncompetitive, and that blunts our edge in exporting. That's why our export in the MSME sector is not, you can say, growing to the extent that would have grown because of the tussle that China has with US. Rather, it is countries like Vietnam that has benefited, or Indonesia, or Thailand. So I think this is one major difficulty. Other is the biases that we have with regards to MSMEs, like take a very important piece of legislation in India, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Now, in Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, 97% of MSMEs are not, you can say, included because they are proprietorship partnership firms. So we have deliberately excluded them from taking advantage of this modern piece of legislation, which essentially tells you that if you fail, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, you can come out of failure and you can start again. Failure in India still remains a high stigma, a very big stigma. And apart from that, you'll be surprised that in the last survey that has come, the census that has come of the crime, that earlier we used to think that only farmers commit suicide, and the number of farmers committing suicide is very high. But you'll be surprised that the highest number of category that is committing suicide is self-employed businessmen. And primary reason is that there is no escape, there is no exit route available to them. So I think these are inherent voices. There are many, but I just pointed out a couple of them. And so far as the low offtake of the scheme is concerned, let me also cite one interesting fact, that although we have huge number of MSMEs registered on Udyam portal, more than 7 crore now. But as I was saying in the Parliamentary Standing Committee yesterday, that the number of industrial connections all over the country are less than 40 lakh. So the size of our manufacturing sector remains very, very small. And when it comes to number of factories that are employing more than 10 people, the number is 2.5 lakh. So although those schemes are meant for a very large segment of society, but we do not have on the ground that much of number, and they have the capacity to absorb those benefits. So that's also a disadvantage, or you can say that is the limitation that we have.
Before I move on to our next speaker, Mr. Bhardwaj, I wanted to also, I wanted you to say, to what extent can digitalization be a solution to some of these problems, if at all? Because digitalization, the report shows, is like a ray of hope for MSMEs. So how can they leverage, in your experience and understanding, digitalization to neutralize or overcome at least some of these structural issues?
I think digitalization can help tremendously in several areas. It has already started happening. For example, you can let the trades platform. It is through this process only that a large number of MSMEs have started getting payment in time, and through a very market-based intervention. Similarly, with regards to compliances also. GST, for example, is a very, very important, you can say, framework of taxation, where MSMEs, particularly who are registered with GST, can take advantage of this regime, where they have to pay tax only on the value that they add, and they can take advantage of, or they can take whatever taxes they have paid on their raw materials, so they become more competitive. And they become competitive not only for the domestic market but for exports also. So I think digitalization is happening, and in e-commerce area, once again, I mean, it has given an extended arm for large number of MSMEs that are producing products which are primarily in the B2C category. B2B, still India, it is evolving. But I think because currently only 2 large platforms are there, and they are driven primarily from the fact that they want to cater to the needs of the consumers. So it's a B2C segment that has taken a fillip. But I think ONDC is coming, and Atishji would tell you that the government has come out with a new scheme, the team scheme, and I think 277 crore plus money has been allocated, where large number of MSME, I think around 5 lakh or maybe more, would be onboarded on ONDC. ONDC is something that I think we are pinning a lot of hopes as a sector, because it's going to give competition to, first of all, these 2 monopolies that we have, and it is also emerging, and then emergence of GEM, which is primarily B2B, and because B2B in the sense the government is buying, B2G rather, and I think with passage of time we'd have emergence of new portals which would be in the B2B category, like Alibaba, which is, I think, so far not there in India. But I think in terms of cost of compliance, in terms of expansion in the market, in terms of access to better priced finance and financial instruments, I think in all these areas, digitization is going to tremendously help.
Thank you, Mr. Bharadwaj. I'd like to invite Professor Ram Singh next to give us his views, and specifically I had a question, maybe now or later in the second round. You could say, did it come as a surprise to you as well that the MSMEs are financially performing well, even hiring more and more people that the survey shows? I certainly was taken by surprise by that finding.
Yes, thank you, Puja. I want to start by complimenting the ICRIER and the ICRIER team for coming out with a very insightful, very interesting report. I want to put the issue of digitization and its benefits. My esteemed panelist highlighted benefits of digitization, and some of the benefits get documented, listed in the report also, that it is any entity, small or medium, able to digitize, especially the revenue side, stands to gain. That comes out very clearly. I want to put this finding and my views on the subject in a wider context. At Delhi School of Economics, we are involved in a study on MSMEs. And what we find is that the capital intensity of production in MSME space, capital intensity increases with scale, as we would expect. That the medium enterprises are more capital intensive, more productive, also more profitable compared to small. Small enterprises in turn are more capital intensive, more productive, more profitable. However, employment intensity goes in the opposite direction. The point I want to make is that as capital intensity goes up, including increasing capital intensity for the purpose of digitization, it comes at the expense of employment creation. Per unit, per capital, whichever way we look at employment intensity, it comes down with the capitalization. So, whereas at the same time, we say that the small is inefficient, small is not beautiful, it is associated with inefficiency. So, it had benefit. So far, it had benefit in terms of keeping people engaged. They were not fully productively engaged, but at least there was some employment. So this inefficiency had some benefits associated with it. Due to emergence of tech platform and digitization, this phenomenon is also going to come under stress. Now it's going to be even more difficult for small and micro enterprises to remain inefficient but viable. This is going to become even more difficult because in the presentation, Tanu mentioned that when you onboard a tech platform, then return and refund becomes an issue. For that, you need to have enough of logistics in place to be able to compete with the big companies in the same space. And something what Mr. Bhardwaj mentioned by way of dumping, by way of control, custom tariff control and all, a similar phenomenon is at work domestically. We see tech platforms, big corporations, they are engaged in kind of effective dumping. That is making it very difficult. On one hand, it generates the incentive to onboard, to digitize, but in the process, it is also expensive to onboard. Those micro and small units that are bound to fail to digitize onboard tech platform are going to be under increasing stress. So now the question in such a situation is, what are the policy responses that can be undertaken? I want to put some blame, before I make a recommendation, I want to put some blame on our regulatory apparatus. So we have it comes out very clearly in the report and also in the panel discussion that it's our regulatory apparatus that incentivizes our entities to remain small and inefficient. There are some low hanging fruits. It seems like that they are low hanging fruits, but they are responsible for two things. On one hand, they incentivize our firms to remain small. At the same time, they increase cost of remaining small. One area is land use regulation. We have created artificial scarcity of land use regulation. There's a study that shows that if a small or medium or micro enterprise, if they were to meet norms, regulatory norms of land use, then there's no way they can make any use of ground floor, because you have to leave unoccupied, unbuilt area on your front, on your left, on your right, on your back. It means that you can do your business only on first floor or second floor. That in turn increases the cost of doing your business. So land use regulation is one area that makes land artificially very expensive, and it's something that can be done to increase viability of these enterprises. Other comes in the form of criminal laws that criminalize activities. There are why Inspector Raj prevails. For Inspector Raj to prevail, it must be difficult for entities to comply with regulatory apparatus, because there must be violation for Inspector Raj to engage in rent seeking. So land use regulation is one, and the criminal the criminal aspects of commercial laws that deal with the production, retail, that in trading, they are unnecessarily and excessively have criminal footprints. That for small things, there's a provision for sending the entrepreneur to jail. And if so who wants to face prospect of going to jail? And then that makes them extremely vulnerable to rent seeking by the inspector. So some of this, if the background problems can be removed, that will go a long way in reducing this extortion that it seems like happening. I give you one more example by way of what we call special mention account. You see, if we look at pure criminal law, people who commit crime end up in jail. Criminal law is lenient towards them also. Good behavior in jail, in prisons, gets rewarded. But in commercial space, if you are MSME and your account became MSME account, it will haunt you for next 10 years. Whereas in prison, 3 years of good behavior get rewarded. And there are provisions that your criminal history gets completely wiped out. But not if by chance you defaulted once. Then it's going, that stigma. It's not actually stigma. It's going to bite you forever. It renders you ineligible for institutional finance from bank. So then you go either to NBFCs, which is a great hope, but they charge upward of 20% interest rate. So it's not a very, let's say, concessional or important source of healthy source of finance. Or entities that fail to get even NBFCs, they go for private institutional, non-institutional finance that makes their life even more miserable. I feel by addressing some of these issues, we can make our entities more viable. Puja, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Ram. Mr. Raj, I invite you to speak next. We've heard so much about how small is not beautiful, how it's costly to be small. It's also the cost of failure is so high for MSMEs. What are your thoughts on some of these points? And especially, I think the panel now needs to also begin to discuss a bit on, the good in digitalizing.
Thank you, Puja. And first of all, I would like to thank Tanu and Deepak for inviting me for this panel discussion. I would like to join others in complimenting you for bringing out such a wonderful report. I have not really come across any other such report which gives such a comprehensive and comparative analysis of integrated MSMEs and non-integrated MSMEs. It was really good to go through, though I didn't get much time to go through the report, but when I quickly glanced through, came across very nice features. And of course, I have some of the suggestions to make, which I'll make towards the end of my comments. So this is one. Now let me come to the main thing. I will come to your point little. Let me talk about digitalization. The report basically covers about basically sales through e-commerce or electronic platforms. But I think digitalization much more than that. It's basically complete integration of various digital technology into all areas of operations of an enterprise. It's a long journey, and I'm not too sure how many MSMEs are doing, but there are of course many advantages of this kind of digitalization. Like you have access to which the report also brings out to finance. You become much more competitive. It's basically, it enhances productivity in the long run, and you also have access to market, transcending beyond your own transcending beyond boundaries. So there are many advantages, but despite that, the fact remains that that use of digital technologies in MSME remains minimal. This is not only the case in India; it's also the case in many other countries. Whatever literature I have gone through in many other countries, including some of the advanced economies. But why is it so? It's basically because you need basically large resources. MSMEs, we have talked a lot about resource lack of finance. So when you are already facing shortage of finance, so you need resources to apply digital technology which you don't have. And then on top of it, when you initially start the process, you need time and energy. Imagine a micro enterprise which is being run by 1 or 2 people. Can they really afford to apply digital technologies? So, and moreover, they are really, many micro enterprises, I believe they are, struggling to survive, and they're bogged down with day-to-day operational problems. So that's why they basically try to use digital technology only where they are facing some specific problem, and they find that there is some technology which can help them to address that problem. And my feeling, again, coming from the literature and meeting some of the MSMEs, that they are looking for low-cost technology solutions which are easy to implement and quick to adopt. So this is the major problem, and I'm saying if whosoever is adopting this technology, I'm talking about MSMEs, they're basically doing to survive rather than as a part of their long-term, some strategic growth in the long run. But I think times have already changed, and times are going to change much faster. And then the question is that whether MSMEs can continue to remain in silos and not adopt technology when countries in other countries, other MSMEs in other countries are going to adopt. I believe there is a need for much more policy support to MSMEs, particularly from the government and the regulatory bodies, and also from banks and financial institutions. You pick up any article on problems being faced by MSMEs, any publication, the topmost problem which comes in any such pieces is like lack of finance. And the cost of finance, of course, is another thing. Of course, in the morning I was, when Mr. Sarangi was mentioning that why the cost of credit to MSME is so high, and then he was referring to banks. I was wondering it can't be so high cost from banks, but now it has got clarified. It's basically because of most of the MSMEs are not able to get funding from the banks, and they're getting funding from NBFCs. If you get funding from NBFCs, you can add simply 2.5% extra, and that's what is happening. Otherwise, banks, I don't think they're charging such high interest rates. So the issue is that they need a lot of financial support, and I think they also need a lot of hand holding from trade bodies. I don't know whether there are many trade bodies for this MSME sector. They need a lot of support from them, and they need to invest a lot in skill development. And of course, if they want to digitalize, then I think MSME also need to have commitment. These are my broad points about the digitalization and MSE. But I have just two suggestions, Tanu, for your report. One suggestion is, I think as the time passes, I'm sure that MSME will use more and more digital technology. So it will be very useful to know as to what kinds of technologies different MSMEs are following. So I think it would be nice to cover them in your future reports. And second, I think it will also be important to see the transition taking place from micro to small, small to medium, and medium to large. And this should be done both in the case of this thing, those MSME which are on electronic platform and otherwise, because this will help us to know whether those companies which are integrated with e-commerce, whether they are growing faster than other companies. Of course, somebody had raised this question in the forum, when you were presenting that about the delayed payment. I think one thing which I didn't find in the report was about the receivables. I think it's better to cover receivables, while finance from banks and other financial issues could be a big issue. But I think receivables may be a big issue even for some of the MSMEs. Can you, sorry, Puja, you had some question for me to start when you started.
Yeah, all that I was saying is that how could digitalization help overcome some of these structural issues?
Yeah, no, it's basically it's a long-term project. In the long run, it's definitely going to make you more competitive, more productive. But in the short run, it could be disruptive. I'm not too sure. Like some of the structural problem which the MSME sector is facing, they can come through. Digitalization actually it could add to the problem in the initial stages, as I was saying, like lack of finance. I don't think you can get funding little cheaper, but that too only if you're already having some access to electronic platforms. So I'm not too sure. Like some of the structural issues which the MSME sector is facing in India could be addressed through digitalization. You need a lot of resources. So if you're already not having enough resources, I'm not too sure really how can you do that. I will stop here.
Thank you. Mr. Singh, I deliberately am coming to you after everybody said how difficult life is for MSMEs, despite all the help that government and government schemes extend. But it seems that either they're not able to access all this help, or there may be issues in the designing of it. But whatever be the case, what is the way forward, from the policymakers' point of view on addressing some of these issues, given that digitalization is, you can rely on that's probably a source of help for you in policy making.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So, a pretty gloomy picture has been painted right now about what's happening in the MSME ecosystem. But let me assure you, it is not exactly the case, the way it has been put out. And just to give you, ma'am, respectfully, the credit side, it has been said that the NBFCs are lending more. Let me, give you the perspective. Let me give perspective to that. About out of the total lending in India by the scheduled commercial banks, about 28 to 29 lakh crore is being done by the scheduled commercial banks. NBFCs are contributing about 5.2 lakh crores. And another 2 lakh crores is being done by the MFIs. So let that be very, very clear that the larger money which is going on the credit side is from the formal space, is from the scheduled commercial banks. Also, ma'am, respectfully, another thing which was put out is the GST. The GST, ma'am, you don't GST is you said that it is said that 40 lakhs if you have a turnover less than 40 lakhs you don't need, but if the moment you cross over you need to get into. So the moment you board not right e-commerce. So ma'am, we need to be absolutely clear on what are we talking about. Nobody is preventing you to do that 40 lakhs or no 40 lakhs. The point is that if you are below 40 lakhs you can do only your selling of your products or transactions intrastate. You can't do that interstate. So that is a difference you have to understand and appreciate. So that is not, so your question is that, why schemes, that's another, information asymmetry is a big problem. The government is cognizant of that. We understand that is the situation. And, but two things also need to be, you need to read all that with two other things. A lot of misinformation, a lot of, wrong information, or a lot of, different kind of narratives is out there into this. So I think that also we need to clarify, like today itself in this panel, we are talking about the credit numbers. So that is not the case. The GST, that is not the case, ma'am. So also, insofar as the, the schemes awareness and their rollout and the issues and implementation. So, the government came out with, on the MSME side, this is a strong realization and understanding. And if you look at one of our latest,
Many times we are not able to make out what you're saying, sir.
Okay. So one of the latest programs which the government has rolled out is the RAMP program, if you haven't heard of that. So raising and accelerating MSME performance. So this is a program which clearly understands that there is a big information asymmetry situation on the ground. And so while a lot of the other programs inside the government, including the Ministry of MSME and other ministries which are operating in the MSME arena, for example, the Ministry of Textiles or maybe the Ministry of food processing. So they have a very big MSME footprint. Now there are a lot of brick and mortar solutions being provided through those ministries, programs, and schemes. But RAMP is a program which realizes that while brick and mortar is great, but there are a lot of intangibles which are happening, and one of the big intangibles is information asymmetry awareness. So it focuses entirely on that. So we have got into an arrangement with all state governments, but ultimately it is the state governments which has to put this across. So all the state governments and union territories have now come up with a roadmap for the MSME sector, which itself is a big game changer of sorts, because a lot of times the state governments had industry policies or something, but there was nothing happening on the MSME side, or there was something which was embedded inside the industry policy itself. Now every state and union territory has an MSME roadmap, and they have also developed what is known as a strategic investment plan. And a strategic investment plan encapsulates different projects, schemes, policy, forward direction, other things, and all that has been now put into a document. Other than that, whatever funding is required, part funding has been done through the central government, the remaining is being done by the state government. Another great thing which has happened because of RAMP is that now I think 11 states have come up with a separate dedicated department for MSMEs, and they've kind of delinked it with the Department of Industries. Another 12 states have come up with an MSME policy. So these are things which are happening out of the RAM program, and there a lot of funding is going into awareness campaigns, into creating systems which make the people understand what are the different schemes, how they can take the benefit of different programs of the Government of India and the state governments. Then there is under the RAM program itself, what is being developed is known as a portal of portals. So there are various portals, and the state governments have different portals to avail of schemes, or there are manual ways to avail of the scheme benefits. Then on the regulatory side, there are another system of other portals or other systems which are available, and there are other private agencies and operators which provide different incentives and benefits. So the ministry is creating a singular portal which will have all the interoperability with all the existing portals of the Government of India, the state governments, regulatory bodies and private agencies, and with a single sign-on you can avail of all the benefits and incentives. So if you want to avail of presently the situation, if you want to avail of the zero defect scheme, you have to go to the Z portal and create your own ID and remember that password. If you want to avail the benefits of the cluster development program in Maharashtra, you have to have another sign-on and you have to create another password. But over here in the portal of portals, you will be able to access all the schemes with a single sign-on. And the AI engine of that portal will also, look at once you punched in your Udyam data, it will also suggest to you what are the schemes you can, which will be useful for you, which it will prompt that you can take charge of these schemes, and you can look at this program of this government and so on and so on. So I'm just these are some of the things which the government is doing to improve the traction on the ground with respect to making the MSMEs what are the different programs and schemes.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. We'll open the house floor for questions from the house, but before that, I'll use the privilege of being the moderator of putting two questions to you. One, I wanted to understand that of those MSMEs that are registered with various schemes that government offers, could you share with us some data on how they've been successful in moving from micro to maybe medium and then to large, so that will give us a sense of how firms are able to leverage your schemes and grow and become profitable. And secondly, of these various platforms and various schemes that you're listing, what is the pickup of the entire universe of MSMEs that we have? How many are accessing these schemes, if we have a broad number on that?
Okay, ma'am. So these are very specific numbers which you are asking for. I don't have the data right now with you, but I can tell you the 2-3 things which are which would be relevant to answer some part of your question. So, ma'am, one thing which is again it's another narrative which is kind of being developed. That the MSMEs or the professor from Delhi School of Economics was saying that they don't want to get out of the small, or the entire regulatory framework or the government system is designed in such a manner that it disincentivizes the MSME to move into the larger or a bigger corporate. I strongly refute that. That is absolutely not the case. And show me the evidence. What is the extent of this problem? Let us look at those numbers. That may be anecdotal evidence, something here or there, or maybe it may be regional or sectoral. But I don't think so. That is definitely not the case. And there may be areas where we can
against that and introduce the economic survey of 2019 written by the CA Krishnamurthy Subramanian, who covered an entire section on exactly this.
Right. So now I'm saying, let's look at the extent. So there are 6.3, 6.4 crore MSMEs, which is probably going to become 10 crores under the Udyam regime, and maybe even more. And so, how much of that is happening? Is it in lakhs? Is it in thousands? Is it in crores? Let me. I've never seen anything like that. Anyway, ma'am. So that is one part, and insofar as the MSME is taking advantage of these schemes, so every scheme has its own numbers and participation. But if you look at these schemes which are end-to-end digitalization, end-to-end digitized or digitalized, I think there we are seeing greater participation. Let us look at the zero effect, zero defect program, which is completely from the beginning to from the moment you register till you get the benefits. So there the numbers are amazing. In the previous episode, that was in 2020, we had about 500 registrations. Today there are more than 3 lakh registrations. And so what I'm saying is, if and that's what your survey also states, the more digitally mature you become, you'll be able to get better benefits and better advantages of the government programs. Yeah.
That's significant growth. Thank you for taking our questions. Should we start with the author of the report, Tanu?
So please let me exercise my author privileges, and also because some of the comments that the panel made were directed towards the report. We have addressed some of the issues in the report, and as you'll read the full report, you'll find that a bit on the performance of the firms. We've also tried to track in terms of turnover, how many firms have become from small to medium. So some of those issues, but I think a very important aspect of the survey, and Atishji, this is directly, I'm not sure if you like it, but directly directed towards you, is on the access to finance part. And through, I've been associated with the Ministry of MSME on various things, and I know that a lot of work is happening on improving this access to finance part, but I recently read that a lot of work is being done on using the digital footprint of MSMEs to enhance their access to finance. And obviously, this goes beyond commercial banks. So would you like to shed light on this particular aspect, that what kind of, first of all, credit assessment models are we looking at when we talk about digital footprints, and how are we going to be leveraging it to improve access to finance? Importantly, would that also help firms to avail credit at favorable rate of interest? Because that is something which is becoming, and in the absence of physical collateral, do you think that the models are now going to be replacing physical with information? So could you please share with us what work has been done or is being done in the ministry to address some of these issues?
Thank you, ma'am. So presently, ma'am, there are the different the banking system. One more narrative which is there, which I would like to dispel. Some notions which are there. So over here, and lot of the things which are being said or being put out are from the the MSME ecosystem. That is the demand side. That's what they want from the banking system or from the lending side. But nobody is looking. You also need to look at the lending side. You are saying that the rate of interest is very high. You are saying that the delivery of these services is inefficient, or you are also saying that it is the turnaround time is very high. These are the general standard charges against the banking system. But also look at the supply. So what's happening over there? Ultimately, they are also an organization. Banks they are responsible to the shareholders. They are a business unit. They are there to make money, and they have their own systems and processes and due diligence to follow. I'm not saying that everything is absolutely great over there also, but yes, you cannot just simply have one side of the story and then come up with a narrative or come up with a storyline which is being told everywhere. So anyway,
scheduled commercial banks.
Sir.
Are we talking of NBFCs or scheduled commercial?
We are talking about everybody. I will answer your question. Let me just finish. So just to answer ma'am's question is that presently there are the model which is being followed for the purposes of risk assessment. The banks either look at your collateral, so there is a collateral based risk assessment, or there is an asset based risk assessment, and there is a recently introduced cash flow based risk assessment. And there are the turnover based risk assessment process which the banks follow as part of their loan origination systems. So now, if you've been following the news, the government came up in the budget announcement that we will develop a new model which will be based on data and information which is not, which is coming from the digital footprint of various, things which are in the form of information, in the form of utilities, or maybe in the form of your social media footprint and so on and so forth. So there were already a lot of other models, some models like that, which were known as alternative risk assessment models, or alternative scores, or premium scores and other things. So there were already something, but now the government and the RBI have worked together and come up with a definitive, strong model which will assess the risk with respect to repayability and other things for the MSMEs. So this model has also, the finance minister just a couple of days back has also, held a meeting with all the, banks, and this has been explained to them. And while no target has been presently set, but yes, that is something which the government is pushing forward to, so that the MSMEs are able to, leverage this product. So what it will do is this risk model will, you don't need a, an accounting, system to onboard the. See, MSMEs don't need to have any accounting system through a CA or vetted through a CA. That is not required. Another thing which it will do is that it will, you don't need any collateral, or you don't need any asset data or any balance sheet data to showcase that this is your business model. So it will obviously, it is completely online, so it will also help you reduce the turnaround time. So this is a new model which was very strongly proposed and recommended by the government. There was a committee which was formed by the finance ministry, in which MSME ministry was also a part, which went by the name of responsible lending to MSMEs. So this came out of those recommendations, and today we have that budget announcement, and now it has been put out.
Just to add on, one good thing which the government has done, and MSME department, is now each board is monitoring the payment schedule to the MSMEs. So that has become like a mandate. So in the sense, the flow and circular of money is there. Second, all payments are only digital. So there is a digital footprint on the credit worthiness of the MSMEs. So whosoever is the lending, whether it is NBFCs or the banks, there is a complete credit footprint on their worthiness. And that will enhancing their ability to do, because every transaction of their turnover is getting captured, whether payment. So they are completely shifted to digital payments, and that is what they are doing it. So I think these two things which the government is religiously insisting upon and monitoring has improved the credit worthiness to a considerable extent. There's no doubt about it. But yes, interest rate is a problem. That is that.
So ma'am, just one last thing, I'll just tell you another, like ma'am was saying. So trades is another thing which the government is pushing very hard. And so insofar, if you look at the latest announcements, the trades has now been made non-financing pass-through mechanism also, which means that you don't need to go to trades just for the purposes of getting your invoices financed. So like she was saying, now everything has to be digitally, there has to be a digital payment methodology. So trades offers you that chance. So, and we are pushing with all the public sector undertakings, the CPOCs and the state public sector undertaking, to come on board to trades to make sure that everything is done digitally. Yeah.
Could you introduce yourself, please? Can we get a mic over here? Should we extend by 10 minutes the time?
Hello. Yeah, I'm Pinaki Das from Association of Synthetic Fiber Industries, Secretary General. The first question is for Mr. Bharadwaj. He says the protectionism is there, but still under advance authorization and other schemes, people can import duty-free for its export purpose, and then the quality and skills are the major factors in that. So there is no barring in that. That's number one. Second is for Sir Atish Singh ji. For NBFCs, they're charging high, and then more and more credits are coming to the from the NBFC side only. so far MSMEs are concerned. Now, is there any mechanism that NBFCs, they will be debarred from or the lowering the interest rate, or means government will allow a scheme to more, and because it's not a sustainable solution. They are taking more and more loans from NBFCs. It's high interest rates, getting NPAs, and then no businesses, then unless you have a 2 or 3 stages of value addition, can earn more than 10-12%, and where the interest rate is more than that. So in none of the cases it's going to be viable, and once you take the loan, it's going to be defaulted. So
Should
that
we just
is,
select a few questions
Yeah.
and then they can be addressed? Yes, in the back over there, please.
Thank you, Ekajan. My question is basically recently the definition of MSME has been revised, and also it also now includes the services sector. That means IT, CA, architects, fashion designers, etc. But whether the state governments are obliged to accept these definitions and these changes in the MSME sector. And linked question is that whether we have seen in China, MSME sector is given a lot of exemptions, like we give in SEZ. No tax for 10 years, subsidized electricity, subsidized loans, etc. Whether we are thinking of this kind of extending these kind of concessions to the MSME sector.
Yes, please. Over there.
I am Dinesh Sharma. I am a freelance journalist. I have one question for Mr. Bhardwaj, another for Mr. Singh. Mr. Bhardwaj, you referred to the low prices of China One Plus. You know, those companies are not coming to India; they are going to Vietnam or Thailand or Indonesia, and you refer to the low prices of inputs or material. What is the
Please hold the
reason
mic
for that?
closer. We are not able to.
What is the reason for that?
What is the reason for not managing to take the benefit of the opportunity of China Plus
the low
One?
price, high prices of the inputs. High prices of the inputs in India.
Any more questions? Yes. over there.
Can I add one more?
Over there, please.
One question for Mr.
Yeah.
Singh.
I'll come back to you. Over there, please. Let's have a question from the lady there.
My question is, I'm Mehra from Lead at ICRIER University, and my question is specifically for Tanu about the report. I think I missed the opportunity to ask. So given the role of digitalization in the shaping enterprise development, so have you tried to explore, or analysis tried to explore, the factors or the determinants that lead enterprises into integrated and non-integrated space? Thank you.
Mr. Bhardwaj, do you want to first start answering the questions for you?
Let me take the first question. So I had made a comment that Indian MSMEs find it very difficult to access competitively priced raw material in India. And my friend has said that you can have duty-free import of the material under advanced license. I think is it the question? Okay. Now I term it as a flawed argument because of two reasons. One, advance authorization is the facility that is available only when you are exporting, and only less than 1% of MSMEs are exporting. So first, that means 99% of them will have to continue to buy excessively priced raw material in India and still face global competition on their final product. Do you agree with me? Now coming to exports. Theoretically it is correct. Theoretically it is correct that as exporter you can import raw material duty free. But practical life, MSMEs would be requiring small consignments. So like if a steel manufacturer, you would be needing 1 ton of steel. Who on the earth is going to quote for 1 ton of steel for import if you are importing from the large company from there? Nobody is going to do that.
You see the export data, particularly from textiles and apparel, where I am from. Most of the value-added products and small pieces are exported from India.
No, I think
is the thrust area.
We'll be entering into the argument. We'll be entering into the argument. You raised a question. I'm trying to say that, this is a flawed argument because of two reasons. One, that most of the consumers are domestically oriented, so they can't take advantage of this advanced license scheme. Secondly, if you're an exporter, nobody is going to quote you for this small quantity that you are going to import. 99% of the MSMEs, therefore, they procure raw material from India and then they export, and after that they claim the duty. Now, coming to the China Plus thing, this is a fact of life. I am privy to hundreds of such transactions that most of the foreign companies that surveyed India and they thought of shifting their manufacturing base or maybe contract manufacturing in India, they found our processes very, very difficult. Cost of compliances and also import duty regime. See, the difficulty is today, if you're a part of a supply chain, hundreds of items you'll have to import. And import has to be, at the border, there should be less and less cholesterol. There should be least resistance available in terms of duties, in terms of predictability, in terms of logistics. So that's why we see, even if some of the companies that have come, they have come only in and around coastal areas to reduce costs because of very high cost of transport within the country also, and high cost of logistics. So it is, three problems have been identified. One is difficulty in imports because of the QCOs and anti-dumping duties, and every time a new thing will come up and it can spoil your whole program. And second is the high cost of logistics and high cost of compliance. And the most difficult part, they find to negotiate is India's judicial system. There is no finality to it. So, anybody can stop that transport of, for example, your goods, can confiscate it, and then you'll be left to fight the case in the court of law that can go on for tens of years or maybe for decades. Or alternatively, you have to settle the matter at the ground itself by paying the ransom, but as Dr. Am was saying. This is a fact of life. We, people living in India, have tried to find a way out of this. So we continue to live with the system. But foreigners have a better chance in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, where things are much more transparent than, for example, we have in India. And that is the problem. That's why companies that are shifting out of China, none of them are looking at India as a potential place, except those where they see India as a major market of their final product. They are coming, like automobile manufacturer, they see a big market here, air conditioner manufacturer who see a big market here. Those companies are coming, but those companies are not coming that can use India as a manufacturing base for exports.
In fact, Mr. Bhardwaj, an example comes to mind. Lego was negotiating through their government with Government of India to set up a $1 billion manufacturing plant in India, and because of the quality control measures, the non-tariff barriers, they have gone and set that up in Vietnam. It's already up and running now. So 3 years ago, they were negotiating with India, but now that plant has come up in Vietnam. But I think Professor Ram Singh wants to add to this.
Thank you, Puja. I just want to make 2-3 points. One is I want to respond to my esteemed panelist about the incentives, whether there is incentive to stay small or not. I draw, whoever wants to know about this can look at economic survey of, I think, 2021 or 22.
One of the, yeah.
Where they mentioned the dwarfs.
I think the one, yeah, exactly. The one by Krishnamurthy Subramanian.
Right. And also this year's economic survey documents extensive list of regulatory cholesterol hurdles and the fact that disproportionate burden is borne by small, medium, micro enterprises. Other data source I point to is, and we have looked at it, we have looked at ASUSE data on unincorporated enterprises combined with ASI data to check the distribution. We combined ASI to capture the medium and small space and ASUSE to capture micro space. Around 94% are micro and only 6%, I'm giving you generous estimate, together constitute small and medium enterprises. So other data source is e-Udyam data source. We have not had access to that, and Mr. Singh, you may tell us, you can take a look at that data and tell us, what does the distribution look like. But researchers have documented it by way of what a phenomena we describe as a missing middle. So that is there, you can look at ample number of as to, and people who, like Mr. Bhardwaj, my friend there, who are actively involved with MSME associations, they would know. And if you have friends, families, relatives who are running MSMEs, they know that, at one establishment, there are several entities registered. The main idea is to remain small. But if you get caught, then there's an extortion that you have to face. So this is one vicious cycle we are in. We have to acknowledge it and break it. I feel one way to break it might be to provide some incentives, something that Honorable Finance Minister did for income taxpayers, that up to income of 12 lakhs, you have no tax liability. I feel that if somehow we can offer a similar scheme to MSMEs, that up to certain profit of 10 lakhs, 12 lakhs, you have zero tax liability. You can come forward, report truthfully, and you incur no tax liability. No, I'm not talking about tax on profit. I'm talking even about GST. Then I'm hopeful that many more would like to step up, share information, create a digital track record, create digital footprint, and thereby help generate digital collateral that can be used. It answers your question, Puja, you mentioned. The challenge is that NBFCs, their margins are not very high, but given the structure of their business, they end up charging, I think 18% is minimum, and 20 to 24% is the average interest they charge. I think if we can create digital collateral and encourage bank to accept digital collateral as a collateral, that seems to be one way forward to reduce cost of finance for MSMEs, which is a serious issue for most of them.
That is the most challenging and serious issue.
I agree with you.
Unless you have 2-3 stages of value addition, you cannot earn more than 18%.
I could not agree more with you. Yes.
We'll later on come back to Mr. Singh for all the questions for him, because I understand there are a lot of questions for him, a lot of points are being raised for him. But let's first take questions for everybody else. And Tanu, there was a question for Tanu. Let's have Tanu answer that.
First of all, I think CRIER itself and Sharon is doing some great work on the MSME landscape in India. But coming to your question, it's there documented in the report, because we thought that those were the findings which are very similar to last year, so we didn't really bring them out in the presentation. But we do map characteristics of the firms to see what are the kind of firms that integrate on platforms and compare them with those that don't. And we found it's generally generally firms that have younger owners and more educated owners. They are the ones that integrate on platforms. Also, this is something that we brought out, that it's the more productive firms to begin with that actually integrate on platforms. So there's more data in the report. I hope you've got a copy of the report, and there you'll find findings on what are the characteristics of firms that motivate them to get on the platforms.
Run across to find out which of the factors actually contribute most to the adoption of the e-commerce.
Yeah, so it's basically, so we haven't really gone into so this was a purposive sample, right? So we didn't really do any statistical model because of the purposive sample. It will just give you a direction. Right. But the direction that we found is that it's the more younger, more educated firms, and to begin with, more productive firms that onboard on e-commerce platforms.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, please. Yes, Mr. Raj.
The question of interest rate, I think this has come up many times. Let me clarify. This is a very simple calculation. You have 6.25% repo rate. Then on top of that, 2% is the operating cost of banks. And then on top of they have their own net interest margin, something 2.5%. Of course, some banks charge very high net interest margin, something like 5-6%, which is absolutely not required. But on an average, it's 2.5-3%. So if you are taking loans from banks, I'm sure you will get it much cheaper rate than the rate which Tanu has shown in our report. But if you go to NBFCs, then they have to add their net interest margin. So that's why 2% gets added up. So the only way for MSMEs to get cheaper, affordable rate of interest is basically to go to banks. That's our only solution. Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes, over here, please.
I'm Vignesh, professor from IIT Delhi. Thank you very much for this wonderful.
Louder, please.
I'm Vignesh, professor from IIT Delhi. Thank you very much for this wonderful panel. 2 questions. First question is open to the panel. The question related to digitalization. I would like to get a lot more insights on whether we are talking about front-end technologies, back-end technologies. What is the nature of the technology that investment is happening? Is there any challenges related to it? That's an open question. Second question to Mr. Anil. I'm interested in knowing what is the role played by trade associations in bringing these smaller enterprises into e-commerce platforms, or in terms of using a lot more new technologies. Thank you.
Dr. Sharma, would you like to take the first question, and then Mr. Bhattacharya can?
I'll take the first question. See, I must say that the interest of this entire forum and panelists, that we are more like a devil's advocate to you, is basically to make MSME ministry very, very strong. Right? It is very important for that ministry to be strong and move ahead with it. So if you look at the digitization process, many of the e-commerce platforms are hand-holding their suppliers to shift to the digital. So they are sort of providing them as a CSR activity or as a hand-holding activity to shift to the digitization process. So in the standard products where they can't afford to have a digitization person, they are helping them out. Similarly, in their returns, the returns they will have to file, because now they are subjected to GST, they are hand-holding them to go ahead with it. So this has started happening, and it is having a very good impact. So all those who are boarding these e-commerce platforms, they are going for it. Then, like was mentioned by my co-panelist, the procurement by the government, the GEM platform, right? It is more for the encouragement of it. And the basic principle why this GEM platform was made, when we made it, was a prompt payment by the government, a very prompt payment by the government. And there was a time when the Public Enterprise Ministry and MSME used to monitor it. And immediately a letter used to go to secretary that you are exceeding more than 15 days or 20 days of payment. So please have a look at what's happening in your budget. So that enabled them to have a float of money and lesser requirement for the working capital. So in digitization, they have been hooked to that also, into the entire payment systems. Then one good thing that is happening into their databases, which they have now 4-5 portals, and what he very rightly said of merging all of them together. So one registration, and once they have posted the data, they need not do it multiple times when they are moving ahead with it. But in this entire process, the banking is still not linked, even though CIBIL score may be there and everything will improve. The banks, because even if a small default has happened, they are not giving the loan. Like what your colleague was saying, the access is not there to the bank for requiring a cheaper loan. That is a problem. That is a problem. And what another unfortunate thing, my request to MSME is, this Mudra loan is getting double booked. It is generally, Mudra loan is being given by microfinance institutions, which in research you should do it. It is being given by the microfinance institution, and microfinance institution in turn take loan from NBFC, who in turn take loan from the bank, right? So in this change, then Mudra targets are reported by everybody. So this is happening. So that is where the Mudra number may look huge in absolute numbers, but in real terms, it is a small number. And this correction we have requested them to do, but still there are some doubt points are there. So that is to be taken care of. So MSME government has digitized all the scheme. You can go, you can board, you can register, you can do your business, you can do everything. And for all that, if you look at the background softwares, they're all standardized software. So it's not reinvent yourself or reinvent the wheel kinds. And one last point I'll tell you to answer your question is when you're looking at their compliance softwares, they are having a very big problem because they are not able to afford to engage somebody. So in the skilling, one request that has gone, still not done, is like you are telling now that the industry should engage young students as interns with them. Similarly, the MSMEs, we must put the interns, and that cost should be borne by the skilling ministry, so that MSME get an advantage of two trained people and in turn train them, so that the employability also increases and they can move ahead with it. So one good thing that is happening is all these digital footprints are getting interconnected. It's a one-time thing and they're all going for the standardized thing. They need not go again. But my worry is the somersaults that happen. Like we have now shifted for the digital payments, but there is a talk to now have a commission on the UPI payment. And already for RTGS and NIFT, in some places they have started that commission. Whereas digitization has to be incentivized, right? So that's my constant fight at this moment going on with RBI. So that is where it has to be, okay, how we are going to migrate and take use of it for the advantage of it. So digitization India is very good. And just one point I'll say, that this kind of a somersault which we do, like sometimes a taxation notice came, that venture capital which was given to these startups, they got an income tax notice. And then, with great difficulty it was withdrawn. Or recently what you found is this gaming industry, the startups, they got, retrospective effect GST. They're all fighting it out in the court. So many of these kinds which do not require a manufacturing unit and raw material and everything, they are migrating out. And what my colleague very rightly said, that the footprint is coming to Vietnam, or maybe Philippines also is in the line. So this is what is happening. Like garment, we have lost it to Bangladesh. So that is how it works. So our idea is to make MSME as a centerpiece. This ministry has to be a centerpiece. And everybody in a holistic manner has to plug the holes if we want a future for that. Thank you.
Your question is with regards to technology. So,
What is the role played by players?
Yeah. So, first of all, let's acknowledge that technological obsolescence is widespread in MSME sector. And over in the 1,000 odd clusters that most of our manufacturing MSMEs are located, technological obsolescence, as I said, is widespread. And there is a historical reason. We don't have time. We can't really go into that because there has been a history of reservation for over 50 years. So that's why it has happened. But slowly and slowly things have opened, especially after removal of quantitative restriction under WTO. And after 2002, everything was open to competition. Now things, of course, started changing after QCOs. But what are we doing? As a federation, what we have done recently, for example, I'm talking about the recent developments. So recently we held an international conference on mass technological upgradation experiences of different countries. And we had several experts coming over from different countries, especially there was a person from Aston University of UK, and the other one was from Italy, and another one from Germany. And they shared their experiences. And there are certain best practices that definitely we can adopt. One important thing that has also come out, and for which we had taken an initiative with the help in collaboration with IFCI Limited, which is a Government of India enterprise, and we set up a center of excellence for aspiring SMEs, where we are trying to address two issues. One is access to equity, because technology, when the moment it comes to the issue of technological upgradation, issue is access to finance. And especially if you want to move out from small to medium, the gap and the reason why there is a missing middle is then you have to have access to equity. And that is certainly an area which is completely missing in our banking and financial system. You can't really raise equity easily. And without equity, you can't raise bigger financing. So it's easy to go from 1 to 5 crore. it is very difficult to go from 5 crore to 100 crore, because then you'd be needing an investment of 20 crore and you have to have 5 or 10 crore from your own pocket. That's equity that you have to bring. External equity market for MSME sector has been non-functional. So what we are trying to do under this center is, we are trying to assess external equity either through the private equity route or through IPOs through MSMEs. So around 30 odd MSMEs we have helped, who have been really joined the IPO bandwagon, and now they are listed companies. So they have been able to raise the external equity through that route. Private equity also we are helping around a dozen or so companies we have already assisted, and 30 more such examples are there. So this is the area by which we are doing. Another is technology. So in technology we have identified for India 3 countries. One is South Korea, other is Vietnam, Taiwan, and other is Japan. These 3 countries we have focused. We have made specific interventions in these countries, especially with South Korea. So you'll be surprised that we already have around 100 odd such relationships with the Indian companies of South Korean SMEs. And there is an association of South Korean SMEs in India. There are already around 500 members of this. So through this collaborative effort, I mean, we are helping access to technology. We have to acknowledge first that we are lagging behind, and tremendously lagging behind, whether it is engineering, whether it is food processing, or even textile and garments. So once we acknowledge this and we see that which are the routes and areas where we can sources of these technologies, and then we can perhaps make move. So access to finance and identification of the sources, these 2 routes we are trying to address this issue.
Yes, sir, please. Can you get a mic here?
I think Dr. Ram Singh rightly mentioned that 94% units are micro, in fact, and many of them are can be characterized as tiny or etc. Classification apart. But that's been the case right through, and it will remain so. I think we need to separate micro units problems from the medium scale units, number one, and the small scale units. And there used to be, and I think we are discussing in MSMEs together collectively, and that is creating problems to me, because the medium scale units are very much import dependent. If you see out of the 124 national industrial classification based sector, 107 sectors are hugely import dependent, 50 to 70% import dependence. And that's what I saw Anil Bhardwaj, sort of talking about, etc. Their problems. And you want every policy to suit those import dependent units as far as, but most of the micro units are not really actually import dependent as far as concerned. They deal with very different sorts of challenges, and they are maybe in clusters at times, but many of them are not even in clusters as far as is concerned. The kind of policy support and the technical support that they need, they used to be earlier policy. I have interacted with the Department of Science and Technology, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. We used to provide polytechnology centers, support for all kinds. Location matters, whether it is in rural or it is in town or it is in metro or is in an industrial city. I think we need to bring in all these issues and concerns in mind if we really want to actually tackle employment also as a challenge as far as is concerned. Otherwise, we are building import dependence in this country. It's huge. That's not how China went as far as is concerned. They, in fact, reduced their import dependence over the period and did excellently well. And they put in investment to actually support technology, which I don't see Anil Bhardwaj at the moment being able to tackle as through an association. He can't tackle it. It has to be tackled by a very different kind of state policy.
Ram, do you want to respond to that? Okay, there were questions for Mr. Singh, so we should now, since we have all said so much, we should give him an opportunity to respond to at least. There was one specific question which we haven't yet taken for you. Yes, please.
Can you tell me the ratio of bad loans suffered by the micro and small industry and big borrowers? What is the who is the biggest defaulter, the small and medium or the big borrowers?
It's very difficult for small borrowers to not repay. The costs are much more.
No, but in numbers, yes, it's the big players. If you see the written off amount, then of course it's the big players. No, it's tiny amounts. And by MFIN, the recovery percentage is 19%.
Because if you're small, you cannot afford to not repay. You have to repay.
All microfinance 98%.
Also, Puja, but also, to be able to default, you should be able to borrow. Right?
Yeah.
If you cannot borrow, right, how can you default? Just we have to keep that also in mind. Yes, sir.
I've got some information on the delinquency part. This is slightly September 24 data. So if your question was that what is the delinquency in the micro, small and medium? In the micro from the S, this is 5.08%. That's the GNPA. And in the small it is 3.6. And in the medium it is 2.4. That's the September 24 data on NPA.
And I think the industry average is 2 point something, no? Yeah.
Which one?
The overall average is...
Overall average is 4.1. 4.1. But the NBFC delinquency of the MSME portfolio in NBFC, that's 3.7. And ma'am was talking about Mudra. I'll tell you, Mudra is also very interesting. Mudra is just 2.7%. So this is another, a lot of people keep saying that there are a lot of, delinquency is very high in the MSME portfolio, and therefore banks are, risk averse and they don't want to let. Just look at the numbers. This, yeah. That's what I'm saying. I've started by saying, because everybody's against me in this room, I started by saying that. I said
we are here to strengthen your hands with information.
So there are a lot of different alternative narrative, which is not, we need to clear that fog. You're right. We need to put, a lot of numbers out there so that this fog is cleared. It's not really, it's not so bad like you're putting it out to be. So anyway, so just one more, somebody was asking about NBFC. So the gentleman also explained how the NBFC system works. So you have to understand NBFC, there are, more than 9,000 NBFCs in India. And some of them are deposit taking and some of them are, most of them are not non-deposit taking. So only the ones which are deposit taking can provide working capital loans. And and since working capital loans are almost about 60% of the total MSME portfolio, so it's very, very important. But like the gentleman was saying, look at the cost of funds of the NBFC. If they are deposit taking, yes, they could be in a situation, because the cost of funds will become lesser if you have deposits. You will ultimately accept deposits, savings account, deposit, current accounts or recurring accounts, where the cost may be anything between 4, 5, 6, 7%. But if you are not a deposit taking NBFC, you will borrow from the banks or other agencies. You will probably borrow in different rates, 12, 13, whatever. And like you explained, if you are borrowing from the banks, bank is having a repo rate plus their own operation cost, so it will cover the NIM and then give to the NBFC. It will probably come to 12%. If the NBFC has to on-lend further to the MSME, it will also cover his cost for operational charges, and then it will become 14, 15, 16, depending on the days you are buying. So that's how the entire thing works. So you have to understand what's happening over there also. You can't simply put the blame square onto the NBFC. He's giving me a lot of that's one part. That's the system part. The other part is you have to ultimately, every bank and every NBFC has its own due diligence process. It has to look at your proposal, whether your proposal is actually worthy of getting a loan. If it is worthy, so what is the cost it should be attributed to it. So all that is also very important. It can't be the case that every project is can be at 10%. Some projects may be more risky. Some projects have other problems which the bank thinks or sees. So therefore the cost of borrowing depends also on the project proposal which is coming from the MSME. So that you cannot discount that. So that's one part. That's the other part. But of course, we realize that this is a problem, and there is a loans which are more than 24%. So there is a cap by the RBI and all that. Yes, so government has come up with certain schemes. So first of all, there is a lot of interest subvention regimes. Different ministries have got different programs. Vishwakarma has an interest subvention of 8%, PM Vishwakarma scheme. In our own ministry, this is one of the big schemes. Then there is an interest subvention program on the green adoption of green technology. There's an interest subvention program on other there is a Swanidhi scheme. I don't know if you the street for the street vendors. So there are different interest subvention schemes which are also through the NBFCs, so which bring down the cost of borrowing. Another thing which the government does is getting into the credit guarantee regime. So if you look at the credit guarantee arena, there is a credit guarantee arrangement in various programs, central government programs and state government programs. CGTMSE is one of the biggest, which provides you 85 to 90% guarantee cover. It incentivizes the banks to lend. Okay. There is all kinds of credit guarantees. There is a portfolio guarantee. There is an individual guarantee. There is a mutual guarantee scheme which was announced in the last budget. So there is a credit guarantee coverage for MSME loans, for Mudra loans, for stand-up loans, for startup loans, for skilling loans. So there are factoring loans. So there are so many of them. So that also is another definitive and strong program of the government to help banks give great, faster and affordable and timely credit to the MSME. Third thing is you need to look at the priority sector lending. There is a 7.5% target which has been put to all the banks, which must go only to the micro segment, and from the overall 40% priority sector norms. For the small finance banks, the target for PSL is 75%. For urban cooperative banks, it is 60%. So this is the formal system which has to do this. It has to give loans to it is directing the flow of credit to this particular subsector. So that is another thing which I thought you should know. Another thing out of the PSL is that if there is a shortfall, if the banks are unable to fulfill the PSL target of 40% and 7.5%, it has to pay a penalty. So this penalty is in the form of certain funds which they have to provide, and this fund is now put into another corpus which goes by the name of RIDF, the Rural Infrastructure Development Fund. It's a generic name, but this fund then provides money to different financial intermediaries like the SIDBI or NHB or NABARD, which provides loans to MSMEs or agriculture or other sectors of the PSL. So just to give you an example, to illustrate, suppose the PSL shortfall of the entire country was, let's say, like last year it was, about 3 years back it was 2 lakh crores. Now it's coming down, so now it's become, I think, 90,000 crores. Now 90,000 crores will be put into a corpus. Out of that, 20,000 crores will be given to SIDBI. SIDBI will make sure that this 20,000 crores is now lent only to MSMEs. And the greatest thing about this is the cost of credit, because the RBI gives this money to SIDBI at repo plus 75 basis points, and it comes with a condition that SIDBI will give it to the banks, who in turn will lend it to the micro and small enterprises at a cap of 9%, or at bank rate plus SIDBI rate plus bank charges plus 1.5% or 2%, depending on the way it is. So that will make sure that everybody, all the banks and NBFCs lend to the MSMEs at less than 10%. So it's also a great, great facility which the government has been going on for years. Lastly, just to end this, also we realize that the NBFCs have greater outreach, but the banks have greater due diligence and greater systems. So there's a new model which came out a couple of years back, which is known as a CLM. That is the co-lending model, wherein loans which are given by the banks and the NBFCs can be put together into one basket of sorts. So 80% of the loan lies on the books of the bank and 20% on the books of the NBFC. So this is a system or a new model created to get greater outreach and help the MSMEs get like I said, the biggest mantra is to make sure that you provide timely credit, adequate credit, and affordable credit. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. I hope this discussion has helped address some of the asymmetry of information and understanding on that side and this side, as well as given some takeaways for next year's survey and some takeaways for policy making in addressing some of the points that were raised on the challenges and difficulties that MSMEs face in India. Thank you to everybody. Thank you so much.
Just quickly propose a vote of thanks because a team member has prepared it, and then I request you all to join us for lunch. Thank you everyone who's present. So as we bring this event to a close, I want to extend a heartfelt gratitude to everyone who contributed in the successful release of this report. A special thanks to Dr. Deepak Mishra for his unwavering support throughout the study and for setting the perfect tone for today's event with his welcome address. Unfortunately, sir is not present right now. We also take this moment to appreciate the efforts of various teams at ICRIER who made this event possible and ensured its seamless execution. A big thanks to our events, communications, library and IT and finance teams, including Ms. Harleen Kaur and her team, Ms. Neha Arora and Mr. Rajesh Chaudhary, and Mr. Rajkumar Shahi, Ms. Chaya Singh and Ms. Anvi Mehta and her team for their dedication, hard work, behind the scenes work. We are also deeply grateful to all our speakers and panelists for their insightful discussions and contributions, enriching today's panel. A special note of appreciation to Ms. Puja Mehra for her excellent moderation of the panel. I also want to express my sincere thanks to the enterprises who participated in the survey, sharing their candid opinions on crucial issues affecting the MSME sectors, made these insights invaluable. And finally, thank you to each and every one of you who are here, and thank you for your time and engagement on making this event a success. On that note, please join us for lunch. Thank you, everyone.